In the horror comedy Once Bitten, who was the role of the Countess specifically written for? Where was one of the writers, Jeffrey Howells, working by the time Once Bitten was released to theaters? How did test audiences influence the design of the movie poster? These and many more questions will be answered on this episode of Vampires? Vampires? Did you say Yes, do I have some books on vampires? Goodness gracious, just follow me. You know, it is most unfortunate the shocking reputation that vampires are having these days. You know, most people are basing their opinions on those silly vampire movies. My name is Zoe. It's spelled Z-O or Z to the O for those of you outside of the U.S. Welcome back, friends. This is the 196th episode of Backlook Cinema, the podcast where we take a look back at the movies of yesteryear, especially the movies of the latter half of the last millennium. If you like what you're about to hear, then please tell your family, tell your friends, and tell that kid who dresses as a vampire every single day for some unknown reason about Backlook Cinema. This is one of those movies that I used to watch all the time growing up. Before Jim Carrey became the huge star that we know today, and before we knew him as a national phenomenon on the hit show In Living Color, Jim Carrey starred in this criminally underrated cult classic. Being that it was an 80s comedy, there were some parts that didn't go well and didn't age well. And I've hesitated for a long time about talking about this movie. After my deliberation, I determined that the problematic parts probably aren't all that bad, and I'm probably making a big deal about nothing. There are some parts, let's be clear, and I know that some people are going to have a problem with it. And even I, when I look back on it and in my rewatch, you know, I still had some I had some newfound reservations. Like at the time that I watched the movie, I didn't have too much of a problem with it. But then as I watched the movie, I watch on the rewatch, I had like newfound reservation because there are some jokes in the movie that a lot of people will consider homophobic, transphobic. So those are the parts in the movie that we all have to be wary of. Honestly, I didn't watch a lot of romantic comedies, and this movie happens to be a romantic comedy horror film, and teenage angst added to it. It's a mix of a lot of genres. And even now, even with my reservations, I still found the movie immensely entertaining. So let's get into it. Let's talk about Once Bitten in the opening credits. Mark Kendall is a high school student who wants what a lot of high schoolers want. He wants to hang out with his bros. He wants to be popular. And most importantly, he wants to get it on with his girlfriend. The girl in question is Robin, but she wants to wait until the time is right. There's a strange hiccup, however. In a moment of temptation to lose his virginity, he gets involved with a strange adult woman known only as the Countess. Though Mark doesn't actually lose his virginity to the Countess, she pursues him relentlessly after their encounter, either with her minions or her overt sexual advances, and Mark tries desperately to keep her at a distance. Meanwhile, Mark's friends notice a change in his style and mannerisms. They like his cool new vampire aesthetic, but Mark doesn't notice these changes and is constantly insisting that he's not dressed as a vampire. Released November 15th, 1985, produced by Nightlife Incorporated and the Samuel Goldwyn Company, it grossed over $10 million in the US and Canada on a reported budget of $3.2 million. And that's amazing. Like, while it wasn't like a runaway hit, it was still profitable, and it kind of gave you an inkling of what Jim Carrey was capable of. This is, as I said before In Living Color, this is actually his very first theatrical appearance. And in a way, he kind of knocked it out of the park in his first showing. If you adjust these numbers for inflation, it would mean that the movie, had it been made today, would have grossed over $30 million on a $9.6 million budget. There's nothing to snot at. It is a very respectable return, and it would lead to him getting other roles, showcasing his talent, getting us to know him, especially on In Living Color, and how he later on became a huge star in the 90s. He was a star so huge that Jean-Claude Van Damme basically tanked his career trying to compete with Jim Carrey's salary. Being that this was his first movie role, he did not get top billing though. That goes to Lauren Hutton, and she played the Countess. You may have also seen her in American Gigolo, 54, Zorro the Gay Blade, or Paper Lion. I'm familiar with the name Lauren Hutton, but this is the only movie that I've seen her in, and I haven't seen I haven't seen any of these other movies that she's in, but I've heard about them. I've heard about all of these movies except for Paper Lion. So they were known. I just had not happened upon them. Up next is Jim Carrey. He plays Mark Kendall. You may have seen him in Liar Liar. I talked about that in episode 164. The Truman Show, Man on the Moon, or more recently, Sonic the Hedgehog, and that series, or a series of unfortunate events, which I liked. I know that there are some people who have issues and complications with this movie, but I happen to like that movie. Up next is Karen Kopins. She plays Robin Pierce, and she's been in movies such as Jake Speed, Troop Beverly Hills, or Lady in Waiting. I have not heard of these movies, but she has a much more prominent career on television. The amazing Cleavon Little plays Sebastian, and you may be more familiar with his role in Blazing Saddles. He's also been in Vanishing Point and Fletch Lives. Thomas Bellator plays Jamie. He has not had a glorious career, but you may have seen him in Fudgy Wudgy Fudge Face or Detonator. And likewise, Skip Lackey plays Russ, and this and only one other movie is credited to him, and the other movie is Mindbenders. And as far as movies is concerned, he's only had 4 writing credits. He's only had 4 acting credits, 3 writing credits, 1 producer credit, 1 additional crew credit, and 1 credit as himself. And that's about it. The other acting roles that he's been in are either TV or shorts, but no other movie roles other than Mindbenders and this movie. This movie was directed by Howard Storm, and Once Bitten is his only motion picture credit. He's directed many TV shows, and his most prominent was Mork and Mindy. He directed 59 episodes of that show, and I loved Mork and Mindy. And he's also directed episodes of Too Close for Comfort, The Red Fox Show, and Me and Mrs. C. This movie was written by Dimitri Villard, David Hines, and Jeffrey Howes. Villard is mainly a producer, and his only other writing credit is In Love and War. Hines has done some producing and some writing. His only other theatrical credit is Bachelor Man. And along with Hines was Howes, and he's also had his only writing credit as Bachelor Man. And that's about it. They have, collectively, they all have very little experience in screen entertainment, right? That is movies or television. They hadn't done much. It seems like they did this one thing and then they dispersed to do other things. I really don't know what happened to them. The composer for this movie was John Dupriez, and you may have heard his music in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles from 1990. I actually talked about that movie in an earlier episode. He's also been involved in UHF, A Fish Called Wanda, Mighty Python's Spamalot, or Spanalot, I'm not exactly sure. And also, it's a kind of filmed musical or performance. It's called Not the Messiah, He's a Very Naughty Boy, a comic oratorio inspired by Monty Python's Life of Brian. And another thing I liked about this movie was the soundtrack. The soundtrack was nice. Obviously, they don't really have that much focus on the soundtrack in today's movies, unless it's like an actual musical like they did back in the 80s and 90s. But this has some bangers of song. I just want to point out a couple of them. The title song, Once Bitten, the same name as the movie, is performed by 3 Speed. It's written by Billy Steinberg and Tom Kelly and 3 Speed. That's my song. I really loved it. It really fits the movie. Also, Hands Off, that was performed for a dance number. I believe they performed the song in its entirety for a dance sequence near the end of the movie. And I love that dance sequence. It was really awesome. It was one of the things that made me love this movie. It was performed by Maria Vidal, and it was written by Tommy Dunbar and Michael Boyd. And finally, Just One Kiss. You heard a snippet of that around the same time as Hands Off. It's performed by Maria Vidal, and it's written by Billy Steinberg and Tom Kelly. So this was nice. And that's it for the opening credits. I don't have any really new announcements except please check out the shop, backclickcenter.com/shop, and still working on the eBay shop, Bazaar de Alonso. And it's like, I'm kind of doubtful that I should even put up an eBay shop, because is anybody actually using that? Maybe I should just put this stuff on Facebook. Perhaps Facebook Marketplace is a better place to try to get rid of my extra stuff. And that's it, as I said, for the opening credits. And now let's go on to our favorite parts. So, and trying to sparse the themes of this movie, it's kind of like, I think one of them is like, just because you can do a thing doesn't mean that you should do that thing. And the other one is that patience is a virtue. Patience is a virtue. Like, there's a time and place for everything. Like, you might want to do something really bad, but just because you want to do something badly, maybe you should wait for the right time to do that thing. And don't break faith with your girlfriend so you can get it on with a vampire. I think that would be something to be wary of. I already said that the music was one of my favorite things about this movie. I love the soundtrack. The soundtrack is on point. I never actually listened to all of the songs in the soundtrack, but just the 3 songs that I had noted were that were featured in the film. Those were fantastic. I didn't even realize that you could probably go out and buy the soundtrack. I don't think it's available anymore. The only way I was able to listen to it was on a playlist on YouTube Music. Well, I listened to some of the songs. I didn't listen to all of the songs. I'm going to try to go over the movie, the broad strokes, as I kind of, at the same time, go over a lot of my favorite parts. The movie opens on the vampire. They don't try to hide that from you. The vampire is a countess. She is in need of a specific type of blood. In this mythology, at least the female vampires although they live eternity, in order to maintain a youthful appearance, they have to get a regular infusion of virgin blood. And because it's the 1980s, it's harder and harder to find a somewhat age appropriate male or a somewhat age appropriate virgin male. And we don't exactly know how, well, she says she's around 400 years old, but she appears to be around 40. So I guess for her, age appropriate would mean someone who is like between 18 and 20. She doesn't typically want to go younger than that. She thinks that like biting an actual child who's guaranteed to be a virgin is beyond the pale. I guess the movie is trying to have some decorum because otherwise she could just attack babies and she would be fine, but she doesn't want to do that. In this version of the vampire mythos, she has to have her, basically, I call it a blood transfusion, but she needs to bite and drink the blood of these virgins. She has to do it 10 days before, well, she has to do it before Halloween. And for whatever reason, this particular year, she waited like really late. And it's 10 days before Halloween before she decides to hatch a plan where she and her minions try to hatch a plan to find a virgin for her to bite. She has to bite that person 3 times for her to maintain her youth. So that basically kind of sets up the structure of the story and what we're working with. The motivating factor behind the story is basically a vampire who needs to bite and drink a particular type of blood and, from a particular type of person. She needs to go out and find that person. And that person, we find out, is going to be Mark. Mark is with his girlfriend. We first meet them. This is one of my favorite parts. It's one of my favorite parts of the movie. It's one of the funniest parts. So he's trying to pressure his girlfriend, Robin, into having sex with him. And I think there are a lot of dudes who find themselves pressuring their girlfriends to try to have sex. And it's not a good idea. You shouldn't try to do that. But that's what a lot of dudes end up doing. And it's for a couple of reasons. Sometimes it's just for the desire to have sex, the hormones are raging and all the other kind of stuff. And the other is pure pressure. And the other thing is like street cred. It's like there's all these things wrapping around losing your virginity. The interesting thing about it says a lot about virginity because this movie is actually talking about male virginity. The first thing about virginity is kind of a made up thing. It's not, there aren't any actual physical changes that your body goes through after you've had sex. It's just an experience that you go through, but people see it as a mantle or like a ethereal thing that kind of hangs around you. And it was really, I guess, like from ancient times till today, it was kind of a mantle that was around women and girls. And while boys were pressured by outside forces usually to go out and have sex, and sometimes, as with many people and as many times as you could, young girls were at the opposite pressure to maintain their virginity for as long as humanly possible, preferably to maintain their virginity until marriage. So this kind of created a weird contradictory conditions on young boys and young girls, boys being pressured to have sex and girls being pressured to refrain from sex. But it's kind of a made up thing. You don't actually undergo any physical change after having sex, but that pressure is still there. Those forces are still there. It's like once a boy has sex, then they're considered have entered manhood. And when a girl has sex, it's almost like she's especially if she has sex before she's married. It's almost like she's damaged goods or no good or she's a sexual deviant. It's a weird situation that humans have put themselves in. These are the notions that this film explores. So you have Mark, who is pressuring his girlfriend to have sex, just like hundreds of boys have pressured hundreds of girls to have sex. And they're in like a parking lot. It almost looks like a drive-in, but I'm not sure if they may be in a drive-in theater. And so there are lots of other cars around. And he's in an ice cream truck because he is an ice cream truck salesman, I guess. And it's a different kind of ice cream truck. It's not a truck where he can go inside the back and sell ice cream from the back. He actually sells ice cream from the front seat. Like the truck has like a back compartment, like I don't know what I'm trying to say, a storage compartment in the back, but it's not big enough to be in. So he kind of, when he sells ice cream, he kind of sits out front and maybe the passenger seat. And then when kids show up to get some ice cream, then he'll walk over to the storage compartment, open up the side and sell his ice cream that way. But anyway, Robin rebuffs Mark's attempts to have sex. They're both virgins and she rebuffs him. She really is unsure and uncomfortable. It's like she almost gives in, right? They start kissing and hugging and whatever, but then somebody knocks on the door and interrupts them. And, Mark has to tell him to go away. This interruption happens twice and this makes Robin very uncomfortable. And then she finally decides that she doesn't want to do it in a car and in a parking lot. She wants to do it the right way. And so Mark is frustrated and he steps out of the car. And this is why it's the funniest part for me. He steps out of the car and in all the cars in that parking lot that is around him, everybody is having sex. Like he looks at one car, you see that there's like, you don't actually see them having sex, but you can tell. It's like you can see legs sticking out of the windows. You can see cars rocking. All of the cars around him are rocking. You hear all these women and men moaning around him and all of these legs sticking out of windows. So he's mad frustrated. It's like everybody around him is having sex except him. And this kind of speaks to the peer pressure that dudes are under when they're in high school. He's under a tremendous amount of peer pressure to lose his virginity. And he's kind of ahead of his friends because he has two of his best friends and they are Jamie and Russ, and they don't have girlfriends. So they actually have to find girlfriends and then proposition them for sex. But Mark is like leagues ahead of that. He's got step one completed. So now he's, step two is to, he's stuck on step two, which is convincing his girlfriend to go through with the act. Mark is being frustrated by Robin. It's like she's totally cock blocking him. So he's gets together with his friends and they're like, you know, let's just go out. Let's go to Hollywood and let's find some strange women and get together with these women. And Mark, being frustrated and pressured, he goes along with it. So they all get in his ice cream truck. They drive down to Hollywood. And it's a nice little montage scene. You see a lot of crazy things happening in Hollywood. Like the movie doesn't let up. It's continuously showing you like interesting things. Like there's a woman in Hollywood that's walking a lion down the street, right? Things like that. And they end up at this, it's like a dating bar or a speed dating bar. It reminds me of speed dating that I used to see, that was being promoted back in the, I guess in the early 2000s or something like that. So I guess the idea of this place is that you go in and there is a phone at the table and the phone is connected to all the other phones. that are on all the other tables. It's kind of like a lounge. So you pick up the phone and you dial the number of the table of the people that you want to talk to, and you can talk to the people at the other table. And then if there's a vibe going along, then I guess you go over to the other table, and then, you have a conversation face to face. So they're in the bar, and Mark gets a call from, well, actually they're all calling people, and they're all having weird experiences. And one particular experience, and this is where it gets a little uncomfortable. At least it gets uncomfortable for me, because I know it's a joke, but I'm not sure if it's like mean spirited or if it's done in good taste. So I think it's Jamie, one of Mark's friends. He gets a call from one of the other tables, and he goes over there, and it's a woman, and it's an older woman, because they're all high school students, and she's really like coming on to him after he goes to her table. And then Jamie realizes there's something different about this woman, and he goes, "Are you a man?" And the woman goes, "Does it matter?" And then, he gets freaked out, and he goes back to his buddies. So when I see stuff like that, it immediately comes to mind, like the type of things that heterosexuals are deathly afraid of. It's like they're deathly afraid of being hit on by someone who is transgender, and it's like they go to some place to have sex or whatever, and then the straight person will find out that the other person is not straight. They hadn't completed their transitions operation. They're in the middle of transition, and they'll get freaked out. I know that there are incidents like this that have happened, and there have been tragic. People have gotten murdered over this, and there actually used to be laws that said that called it like some kind of like crime of passion, where if a heterosexual kills a transgender person, then they'll let that person off, because they'll say that the murderer was not in their right mind or something like that. So they'll basically get away with murder. There have been lots of tragedies like that happen. And so when I think about these tragedies and I see this joke that's being presented on film, I'm not exactly sure if this joke is done in good taste or if this joke is appropriate. Like, I see this, at least when I look at this joke now, it's like I look at another light, in a new light, and with all of my experiences. So I'm not exactly sure if that joke works anymore, if that joke is appropriate anymore. Maybe it's not mean-spirited. Maybe it's not done intentionally to insult others. I can't make up my mind on that. You tell me, you weigh in. What do you think about this situation? And like a situation where in a comedy they would make a joke about this. I mean, I don't know. I'm still conflicted on this. And there are a couple other jokes that I'm conflicted on, and we'll get to those later. But in this same scene, Mark gets a call, and he goes over, and the person that called him was the Countess. And he lies to her and tells her that he's 21. He's nervous, and they're trying to have a conversation. Like, Mark is trying to have a conversation. He's a kid, so he does not know how to talk to an adult woman who is coming on to him. While they're having a conversation, his other friend, Russ, is talking to another adult that's at another table, and they're getting along just great. But then her husband shows up at the bar, and then he starts to freak out, and he has a gun. So he's threatening everybody at the bar with the gun. So, or this club or whatever you call this place. So I think he actually even gets a couple of shots off. So naturally, everybody in the place freaks out. Everybody starts running. People call the police. The man actually gets subdued by security and some of the other patrons that are there, so nobody else gets hurt. Meanwhile, while everybody's freaking out, the Countess and Mark are able to get out of the bar. His friends get trapped there and they end up getting arrested by the police. The Countess, because she's wealthy and she has all these minions and helpers and whatnot, they get into her limousine and driven by her chauffeur. Meanwhile, Mark gives his keys to one of her minions who drives his ice cream truck to her mansion. And then while they're at her mansion, she's being seductive and all of these things. And Mark is being super nervous because it's like he's doing two things. He is in a situation with an obvious adult woman. And the other thing is that he's cheating on his girlfriend. So all of these things are messing with him. And one of the funniest jokes in the movie that I like was when Mark goes into the mansion with her, he asks her, are you a prostitute? And she says, I'm whatever you want me to be. And Mark says, oh, good, because I only have $5. And that is so funny. It's like he's trying to pretend to be something that he's not, and then he's earnest at the same time. It's funny to see him pull that off. She has this assistant, Sebastian, and he's like her butler and her chauffeur and her how do you say that? Major domo? Mojo domo? Like her houseman, I guess. I forgot the title. Anyway, he runs the house. He runs the mansion. And he's always around. He's probably the most positive depiction of a gay person in this movie. But even so, I've read that there were some criticisms of his portrayal. Like there was, I think I put it in the trivia. There was some person that complained that he was playing a stereotype of the gay butler, but I am not familiar with the gay butler stereotype. But there's a scene where he's applying makeup to her, the Countess. He's applying her makeup because she's a vampire and she can't use mirrors. So it's weird because there is a mirror shaped object. So he applies makeup to her through this. It's like a mirror without a glass, essentially. And she's excited about this boy that she's convinced is a virgin, and she's going to bite him to make sure. So she goes back downstairs and Mark is there, like sitting on a couch. And while she's seducing him, she's biting off of his shirt buttons. That's her thing. And I think that's her kink. And Mark is just kind of like prattling because he's nervous. And she starts biting off his shirt buttons and then, at the top of his chest, and she works her way down, and then she unzips his pants, and you don't see what's going on because she's like below the camera. You just see Mark being nervous and uncomfortable, and you hear buckles being removed. You hear zippers go down. So it's like she's taking off his pants. You hear it, but you don't see it. And the next thing you know, he screams out in pain. And then he passes out. And he doesn't know what happened. And he spends the night there asleep. He wakes up the next day. The Countess doesn't want to try to bite him 3 times in the same night. She wants to kind of savor the moment. She wants to let him go back home, let him recover his strength. And then she'll chase him down. She'll find him later and get her second bite. She calls it a transfusion. She needs Mark's blood. After she bites him, she knows that he's a virgin. And she drinks blood all the time, but she particularly needs Mark blood, as I said before, because Mark is still a virgin. All she has to do is bite him 3 more times while he's still a virgin, and then she maintains her youth. What I liked about this movie is the story structure. So, after he gets bit, he immediately starts going through changes, and the story kind of walks you through the changes that he goes through. It's like they don't seem obvious at first, but it's like as the movie plays along, you see more and more of these weird changes. They're not like, I don't want to say they're not obvious changes, because they're obvious changes, but they're subtle changes. And I like the subtle changes that Mark goes through. He just has he starts having weird behaviors, and everybody notices it, and he doesn't notice it. So like one of the changes is, like, before he gets bit, he liked a well done hamburger. Like, he actually likes a burnt hamburger. Like, one time he goes to his friends they work out of some kind of, it's like a burger joint, but it's like a stand. It's more like a burger stand. So he's at his friend's burger stand, and they're cooking hamburgers, and one of the hamburgers get accidentally burnt. And that's the one he wanted. He wanted the burned hamburger. It was like black, and that's the way he liked it. But then after he gets bit, he goes to school, and they're serving hamburgers at school. And obviously when you go to school at a high school, they're not making hamburgers to order. You just get the hamburgers that they serve you. And so he asks for a hamburger, and the hamburger he gets is at first he's looking at the hamburgers that are being cooked, and he's not interested in the cooked hamburger. And then he looks and he sees that there's raw hamburgers behind the cook, and he's like, "Can I get that one over there? One of those?" And the cook is like disgusted, but she grabs one of the raw hamburger patties with the spatula, and she slaps it on this plate with the 2 hamburger buns. And it's like, she's just like shaking her head. It's like, and that's just funny. It's like, and then the other ones the other changes that he goes through is, one day he's waking up, he's sleeping, he has a trunk in front of his bed, and he's sleeping in the trunk. And his father thinks it's weird that he's sleeping in the trunk. Mark doesn't see anything wrong with sleeping in the trunk. He's kind of bothered by the daylight. There was a time when he was getting ready to go to school. His mom is making breakfast. He really likes hamburgers. His mom was making egg burgers, because that's what that is. She was cooking hamburgers. She was gonna, I guess, get some eggs and put the eggs on top of the hamburger, and she was gonna serve them, and that would be his breakfast. When she had the hamburger, she drained the blood in a drinking tumbler, and she went to cook the hamburgers. Mark decides that he doesn't have time to stick around for breakfast. He has to hurry up and go to school. And his mom says, "At least drink your juice." Now there's a tumbler of orange juice right beside the tumbler of blood from the hamburger meat that she poured. And Mark goes, "Yeah, all right." And he absentmindedly grabs the tumbler of blood, and he starts drinking from it. And he doesn't notice. It's like, it's apparently the most delicious juice that he's ever drank. He drinks down, and it's like his mom and his dad are just looking at him like he's crazy, because the orange juice is sitting right there, but he's drinking a tumbler of blood. He doesn't stop drinking. Like, if you were to start drinking a tumbler and realize that it was blood, obviously you're going to start spitting it out and wash your mouth out, and then maybe drink some orange juice. But Mark doesn't. He drinks the whole thing and sets the cup down, and then runs out the house because he's late for school. And his parents are just like in shock. Also, he's starting to dress in black, like black from head to toe. And then when people see him, they think that he's dressed as a vampire, but he keeps having to tell people that he's not wearing a costume. And there was one incident where he's talking to his friends, he tells them how he had an encounter with the Countess. That by this time his friends are out of jail. They were just detained. I guess the police determined that they didn't do anything wrong, so they let him go. He talked about how he had an encounter with the Countess, but he has no memory of what happened. And he thinks he had sex, but he's not sure because he doesn't remember. So he can't, because his friends want the details. If he lost his virginity, obviously the dudes, because they're virgins too, obviously they're going to want all of the details, but he can't tell them anything. And while he's explaining how he doesn't remember anything, Robin walks up. So she hears the whole thing. And so she learns how that he cheated on her. So she breaks up with him. She throws his ring down. Apparently he gave her a ring at some point. She throws his ring down. She walks off. She's mad. But later on, as what happens with some couples, Mark and Robin, they get back together. He sweet talks her. He apologizes. He says he didn't know what would come over him. He's not even sure if he even had sex. And so she decides to give him one more chance. There's another one of my favorite parts you had. Jamie and Russ, they're always hanging out together. They're always trying to score some chicks. So Russ has a brilliant idea. They're going to find some chicks at a laundromat. He says the perfect place to find women. These are lonely, desperate women. And it's a sure thing to find some women at a laundromat. So they go. The laundromat is at nighttime. There's not a lot of people in the laundromat. They go to the laundry. They don't have any clothes. So already they look weird and out of place. They just wander in this laundromat. Everybody else is doing laundry. They're basically stalking. So these women they're adults. There aren't any girls at this laundromat. So they just start hitting on these adults. Jamie hits on this like woman that's built like a truck driver, like built like just like a wrestler, right? So he's trying to talk to her. And then Russ is talking to this other woman that happened to be at the laundromat. And he has this like similar, he has this one pickup line that he opens with. And he'll say something like, "Look, I'm a mature person and you're a mature person. So let's cut this bullshit and do what we really want to do." And the woman, immediately knowing what this kid is doing, she goes, "I'd love that. I love to whip you." And then she starts to grab one of her sheets and starts to wind it up like she's ready to tie him up. It's like, I want to tie you up. I want to whip you. I want to tie you down. And Russ freaks out. And he changes his mind. He starts to try to run away from the woman. And on his way getting away from the woman, she doesn't chase him down. She just scares him away. He sees Jamie is in the dryer. He gets Jamie out of the dryer. And Jamie said, "She said no." It was a great gag. I love that. There's another scene where Mark is meeting Robin he basically walks into where Robin works. So Robin works at a department store or like she works in a mall, and it's either a department store at the mall or a boutique at the mall that sells clothes. I'm not really sure. At any rate, he goes in there. He wants to shop for some new clothes because his fashion sense is changing because he's becoming a vampire. He's developing an affinity for black clothes. So she's giving him some like colorful clothes and he's really shopping for black clothes. So she's helping him shop. And he goes into the dressing room and the Countess is there. The Countess tracked him down and now he's basically trapped with the Countess in the dressing room. He's weary of the Countess now because he's already cheated on his girlfriend and she can't be found here. You're like, he doesn't want to be involved with the Countess anymore, but but she is determined to get her next transfusion of blood. And so there's some certain hijinks that happen. And like, he's talking to Robin through the door of the dressing room. And at the same time, talking to the Countess. Hijinks ensues. And there's a lot of confusion. But in the end, the Countess bites Mark again and is able to slip out of the department store without Robin ever seeing her. But what was funny is that on her way out, she shoves this elderly shopper on her way out of the department store. And what's funny is that she's upset because Robin is kind of getting in the way. She knows that she has to compete with Robin for Mark, and she doesn't like the competition. And it's funny how when she gets upset, she just starts to shove random people. And that's just funny to me. Another one of my favorite part is, Mark at this time, he starts to realize that there's something wrong. When he was, at the ice cream truck, there were some little kids getting ice cream, and he hissed at them like a vampire would. And the kids run away. And he realized there's something wrong with him. So he goes to a Catholic church, and there's a bum there. And he says, "Excuse me," to the bum. He goes into the confessional. The bum looks around, and he goes into the other part of the confessional where the priest usually goes. And then Mark starts to confess his sins about how he was with this other woman and that he might have had sex to her. And then ever since then, he might have had sex with her. And ever since then, he's had these changes. He's scared little kids. He doesn't know what's wrong with himself. And the bum, just says, "Well, get yourself a shovel. You're in deep shit." And then this is Mark thinking that this is a priest, and it's not a priest. It's a funny gag. It's a funny gag, and it's another one of my favorite parts. And now we get to probably one of my favorite parts of the whole film. This is when Mark and Robin show up at the Halloween party. They were supposed to be Jack and Jill. Robin is dressed up as Jill, and Mark says that he couldn't find a costume, so he's wearing what he had been wearing. That's his all black fit. He's like a black shirt, a black jacket, black pants, black shoes. His hair is darker than usual. His skin is much paler. He looks like a vampire. And she comments on this, and he says, "I'm not wearing a costume." And like when they go and they register for the party, because it's a school party, you have to register at the desk. And the student that's taking the registration, she writes down Robin as Jill and Mark as a vampire. And he says, "I'm not wearing a costume." He's getting annoyed. And it's like, even when he gets into the gymnasium, and, they think that he's wearing a costume, he keeps telling them he's not dressed as a vampire. He's not wearing a costume. He gets super annoyed. And the dance starts. Everybody starts dancing, and that's when the Countess comes in. And then when the Countess comes in and starts to approach Mark and dance with Mark, it turns into it turns from like a regular dance party, and it becomes like a dance routine like you would see at a musical. And it was a nice transition. I really enjoyed it. It's like, I hadn't even noticed it's probably not something that you would put in a movie. You wouldn't like shove a dance number in a movie that wasn't a musical. But for just this scene, it becomes a musical. And not only is it a musical, but it's a dance routine that kind of tells the story of the struggle between Robin and this Countess vampire and how they're fighting over Mark. And I think she's fighting to keep Mark, because I think Mark has made it evident that he wants to be with Robin. And so because Mark wants to be with Robin. She's fighting for Mark. So the Countess comes and she's pulling Mark away from Robin. And then Mark gets away from her and runs back to Robin. And that's basically how the dance goes back and forth with Robin and the Countess fighting over Mark, all the while dancing to this song called Hands Off, because it's really like a theme of Robin. She wants the Countess to keep her hands off Mark, and that was the song. So that was, I really loved how all of that took place. The dance was amazing. There's a point where Jim Carrey, he plays his leg like it's a guitar during the guitar solo. That was amazing. And during the dance, the Countess has, because Mark has been bitten twice, the Countess has a little bit more of an influence over Mark. So it's not so much as that she is pulling Mark towards her. She is actually enchanting Mark. She's putting Mark under a spell. So she's putting Mark under a spell and using that spell to pull Mark towards her. And then Robin pulls him away and kind of breaks the spell, but it's going back and forth. It throws Mark into confusion, and he's confused and frustrated and upset. So the Countess goes over to Sebastian. Sebastian is always there, and they're developing a strategy. Meanwhile, while they're doing that, Robin kisses Mark passionately. Oh, also, I forgot to mention, like during this struggle, this back and forth struggle over Mark, remember, Robin is dressed like Jill. The Countess is dressed like, she's at this party in a sexy tuxedo, trying to seduce Mark. And Robin is dressed as Jill. It's the most conservative outfit that you'd think that Jill would have. It's like, if you think about Jill, it's like a full-on frilly dress and a frilly voluminous shirt that doesn't reveal anything. And so when the Countess shows up and tries to take Mark, she realized that she has to compete sexually with the Countess. So the first thing that she does is she just rips off her dress and dances towards Mark and to take Mark away from the Countess. And the Countess is, and they are fighting over Mark. And then she rips off the top half of her costume and to show her like tight t-shirt. So now she's almost naked. And, to be revealing and sexual and to attract Mark. So at this point, this is where she kisses Mark with her, now that she's scantily clad. And that breaks the enchantment that the vampire had put on them. And now, like, he's fully in control of himself and he's fully with Robin at that point. And then Sebastian sees this and he lets the Countess, and he points and shows that Mark has broken her spell. And she gets up and she gets upset. She leaves with Sebastian following. And as she leaves, she shoves a student dressed as a nun, like she did with the lady at the department store. And it's still funny. Like, I think she does it because she's upset, and she just shoves the student on the way out of the gymnasium. And that was funny. And then Mark and Robin finish the dance, and it's an amazing dance. It's like Jim Carrey does some shades of Michael Jackson as he's dancing, and both him and Karen Kopins, they do this really satisfying and impressive dance number, and I really enjoyed it. It was fantastic. And then the song was great too, Hands Off. So I really enjoyed that whole scene. It's definitely, I think it's probably on YouTube. It's definitely worth the watch. If I can find it, I'll put a link to that particular scene in the show notes. So obviously the Countess' intention was to be able to bite Mark that night at the dance. She wasn't able to do it. So her and Sebastian have to think up another way to trap Mark to bite him one last time, to maintain her youth. She already has immortality, but she wants to maintain her youth. At the same time, this third bite will turn Mark into a vampire and make him into one of her minions. She has a bunch of minions, both male and female. And presumably she has done this to all of them. At least some of them talked about how the Countess had turned them into vampires. And they complain, well, the Countess and Sebastian complain about how like 200 or 300 years ago, finding a virgin was super easy. But in the modern days, in the 1980s, it's really hard because kids are having sex at younger and younger ages. And she's having a super hard time finding a virgin. So she's super frustrated. Also at the dance, after the dance is over, the audience cheers. And it's announced that Mark has won the costume contest as a vampire, and he freaks out because he's not wearing a costume, and he runs out of the gymnasium. Robin runs after him, and they're trying to figure out what to do about Mark. And Mark confesses that he thinks that the Countess is a vampire and turning him into one. And Jill thinks this is crazy. Not Jill. Robin thinks this is crazy because then obviously there's no such thing as vampires. And then they happen to be standing by a mirror and they notice that Mark doesn't have a reflection. Robin goes off the next day to do her own research, as we say nowadays. She goes to a bookstore. She talks to the bookseller to find out about vampires. Like, is there really a such thing as vampires? Is there a such thing as female vampires? What can be done with the female vampire after Mark? She doesn't say specifically. She's having these hypothetical questions, and the bookseller explains that, well, the female vampire in particular has to bite a male virgin near their genitalia on the inner thigh, because that's where their blood is more potent for the female vampire. And she has to do it 3 times before Halloween in order to maintain her youth and beauty. Apparently, male vampires don't have this hang up, but female vampires do, because they specifically talk about female vampires. So Robin, armed with this information, she goes to Mark's 2 best friends and she asks them to look at Mark and find out if he has puncture wounds on the inner thigh. She doesn't reveal that they're vampire bites. She suggests that Mark might have a venereal disease and they need to look on his inner thigh for 2 little sores. So this is when we get to the other scene that might be complicated. The scene itself is funny. It's just that there are elements of the scene that might be insensitive. So what happens is, after gym class, they go into the shower. Mark and his friends are in the shower. They're showering next to each other. And while they're showering, Russ and Jamie are trying to surreptitiously look at Mark's legs. They're specifically trying to look at his inner thigh to see if there are 2 little sores. They're soaking wet. The soap is running into Jamie's eyes. They're trying to look but at the same time trying to be sneaky about it. And finally, Russ, he gives up. It's like it's a shower. They're all naked. So he just grabs Mark and he says, "Look now, look." But Jamie can't look to see the sores because he has soap in his eyes. And Mark is fighting to get Russ off of him. He's like, "What are you doing? What are you grabbing me for?" And so the other students look and they see that it almost looks like a prison rape scene, and they're screaming about homosexuals being in the shower. Now, they don't say homosexuals, they use the other word, and that's where it's problematic. I suppose that if I were in high school and I saw that, I would also think that it was an attempted rape by homosexuals, but it was somewhat gruesome because it's like you don't expect your naked friends to start grabbing you and attacking you in the shower. At any rate, that was why that was somewhat problematic. But at the same time, I don't, upon further reflection, I don't think it's that bad, because these aren't, it's not like they started attacking Mark. They just kind of, or his friends, they just ran out of the shower. because they were freaked out. Why? Of course, you would be freaked out if you saw an attack like that. I might be sounding defensive. But I don't have as much of a problem with this scene as I had with the earlier scene. But this is one of the scenes that had made me think that, because I've been wanting to talk about this film for a long time, but this scene in particular was a scene that I was thinking that, well, maybe this film has aged so poorly that I can't talk about it. But when I watched it, it seemed to me that it probably isn't that bad. I think in this case, it's just a joke, and it's still funny, except for the obvious slur that they use. Later on, Mark has to have a conversation with his friends. Like he's at their burger stand, and he's like, "What is going on in the shower?" Like, I guess he knows and trusts his friends well enough to know that they weren't trying to have a prison rape scene, but this conversation needs to be had. It's like, what's going on in the shower? And they confess that Robin had asked him to look for sores on his leg because he might have a venereal disease. And he says, had it ever occurred to you that you could have just asked? And Jamie's confused. He's like, but she told us to look. And then now he's worried that he might be gay. He was like, oh no, I knew it. We're gay. We're Rump Rangers. And basically he has to be convinced that he's not gay. Like, he's like, I knew it. We enjoyed it. It's like, no, you didn't enjoy it. You just did something stupid. Later on, the Countess is, because it's getting close to Halloween, the Countess accelerates or escalates her attempt to get her last transfusion of blood from Mark. So she kidnaps, or she has her minions kidnap Robin. And obviously Mark finds out because I forgot what the clue was, or I think somebody saw her get kidnapped. So he and his friends, they go up to the Countess mansion. They find Robin. Robin warns them it's a trap. And so they get surrounded by vampires. Since they're all captured, they bring Mark to one of the rooms. The Countess has a slanted bench that's set up for Mark, and they tie Mark down on this bench. And the bench is designed so that his legs are strapped to the bench in such a way that the bench opens where his legs are at, to split his legs open. And the Countess is going to make a whole ceremony out of her biting him one last time on his inner thigh. So, he's on the bench. His legs are open, and she's going to just go down, get her last transfusion, and A, turn Mark to a vampire, and B, maintain her youth for her. I don't even know how often she has to do this. I don't remember if it's every year or every couple of 100 years. For however long this spell lasts, that's what she's doing. Probably not that often because she doesn't have that many minions. So probably every 50 years she has to do this, because she has like maybe 6 minions and she's like 400 years old. I'm just doing math, trying to apply logic where no logic is necessary. At any rate, the friends break loose, and they actually have fire, and they're able to use the fire to keep the Countess and the other vampires at bay, and they free Mark. And before they run away, there's a line that Robin says, and she says, she's talking to the Countess, and she says to the Countess, Mark doesn't like you because you're mean and evil. Mark likes me because I'm nice and sweet and pure. So fuck off. And they run away. And I love that part. It's another one of my favorite parts. So there's a chase around the castle with the vampires chasing Mark and their friends. They're more after Mark than anything else. And the vampires are like smashing through the house to get to him. They're like smashing all the doors because they have superhuman strength. Meanwhile, Jamie and Russ, they find themselves in the same room with the only two other female vampires. And Russ just takes this opportunity to hit on these vampires. and he does his same spiel. He's like, we're adults. Let's do what we really want to do. And the vampires, not surprisingly, want to do it because they're vampires. Now, it's not clear if these vampires bite Russ and Jamie, but it seems apparent that they do have sex. At least that is what the movie is leading us to believe. Or maybe they just go ahead and bite them and they become vampires. There was never a sequel made to this movie, so we don't know if they become vampires. We just know that I think that's the last that we see of them when they're with their vampires. Anyways, the other vampires, they're chasing Mark and Robin through the mansion. And there's one neat thing that happens where one of the minions is about to smash through a door, and and the Countess is right behind him, and she yells, "Stop! I have to replace everything you people smash. Don't you think you ought to just try the door first?" And he tries the knob on the door. It's unlocked. It opens, and he shrugs sheepishly. And that was kind of a funny point. They go into the room. They don't see anything, but they notice it's actually a coffin room. It's a room where her minion vampires sleep at. And one of the coffins is rocking. It was actually the coffin that she had prepared for Mark. It's extra large because she wanted something special for Mark. As they approach this coffin, the coffin opens up. It's Mark and Robin, and they said that they have had sex. And at first, the Countess doesn't believe them, but then they start smoking cigarettes, which I guess is the international symbol for having had sex. And then she realizes she's been defeated. And then Halloween comes, because this was the night before Halloween. So Halloween Eve, I guess you would call that. Or All Hallows Eve. And so she starts to age right before everyone's eyes. She starts to get older after midnight. And she goes from looking 40 to looking 60. And she starts to complain that she'll never find another virgin. Never. And Sebastian is there. And Sebastian is comforting her. And she says that, well, you may have had sex, but you didn't enjoy it. And they leave him alone. And Mark and Robin, they close the coffin. And the coffin starts to rock slowly. And that's the end of the movie. And I really enjoyed it. Yes, there were some problematic parts. There are some parts. There's some elements that I'm conflicted about. But overall, I still immensely enjoyed this movie. I enjoyed it as much as I did when I first watched it back in the 80s, back when I was just a teen. And, you know, sometimes when you see something as a teenager and it was great, but then when you grow up, you realize that you've outgrown that form of entertainment. But in this case, I still enjoyed it. I still immensely enjoyed this movie. It was fascinating. It was entertaining. The story structure was great. The Jim Carrey was amazing. The dance number was an unexpected joy. It was a fun time. So now that we've talked about some of our favorite parts, let's go into the top 10 trivia. So all of this trivia I've gotten from IMDb, and we'll start with this. By the time the film was released, writer Jeffrey Howes had blown through his initial earnings and had to take a job as a video store clerk. One day, an oblivious customer remarked of the film, "Whoever wrote this shouldn't be working in Hollywood." And an incensed Howes retorted, "You got your wish." Because, as you remember, Howes was one of the writers of Once Bitten. And apparently after he got paid for that movie and before the movie was released, he went through all of his savings and earnings and apparently was not able to write another film or do anything else in the interim, and ended up working at a video store. And that's kind of a bad deal. I guess the customer complained he shouldn't be working in Hollywood, and he wasn't, unless it was Hollywood Video. During the chase scene, when Robin punches a vampire, she actually hit him in one take and knocked his fake teeth out. That's kind of a bummer. At least she didn't knock his real teeth out. These accidents happen when you don't have a proper stunt coordinator. The role of the Countess was written for Cassandra Peterson, better known as TV horror hostess Elvira. Morgan Fairchild turned down the role of the Countess, and Kathleen Turner was considered for the role, but was not chosen. What's interesting is that it was specifically written for Elvira. I remember seeing Elvira on television, and she warmed my heart. If ever there was a TV personality that was specifically catering to horny little boys, it was Elvira. Screenwriter Jeffrey Howes campaigned for Michael J. Fox to star in the film, but executive producer Samuel Goldwyn Jr. was convinced that Fox would never be able to carry a big screen movie. And boy, was he wrong. Like, he was dead wrong. Like, the most wrong that you could ever be. Jim Carrey's first leading role in a Hollywood feature film. After Carrey became a huge box office magnet in the 1990s, this movie and several others of his were reissued on VHS to capitalize on his newfound success. Jim Carrey was 23 when this movie was released, and Karen Hopkins was 27. So, that's usual, where you have people in their 20s playing teenagers. Interestingly enough, I was fooled. When I watched this, I was a teenager, and I never thought for a second that he was in his 20s. The tune Mark's Ice Cream Truck Plays is a variation on the Peter theme in Sergei Prokofiev's Peter and the Wolf. I hope I said that right. I've been practicing. I don't know if that's the right pronunciation, but yeah, Peter and the Wolf. Test audiences had such a positive reaction to Karen Kopins for her portrayal of Robin that her image was inserted into the film's poster at the last minute. I don't understand why it wouldn't be in the poster in the first place. She's the co-star of the movie. She's one of the main reasons that her character is like essential to the plot. Why wouldn't they include her on the poster? It doesn't make sense, but I'm glad the audience let them know. As scripted, the bum's reaction in the confessional was, "Pass me the toilet paper. I'm all out on this side." The line was changed in post-production because executive producer Samuel Goldwyn Jr. felt the original dialogue would get the film condemned by the Catholic Church. Probably. But I did love the joke that was eventually used. "Get yourself a shovel, you're in deep shit." And Mark thinking that it was a Catholic priest telling him that. That's still funny. In a deleted scene, all the vampire characters were eating cockroaches. Jim Carrey insisted real cockroaches be used. Multiple actors were upset the scene was cut as they were forced to eat cockroaches for nothing. My question is, how does a brand new actor, Jim Carrey, have that much influence and power over what the other actors are doing in the movie? I don't see it. I don't know if this has actually happened, because I don't see how, because he's not directing the film. He's not a producer. How does he have that much power? I'd be upset too. First of all, I wouldn't do it. There's nothing that you can say to me. Stab me, shoot me. I'm not eating cockroaches for nothing. For nothing. It's not going to happen. It's like, I don't care who you are. I'm not I'm not eating cockroaches. You don't pay me enough. And then they cut the scene? Oh, no. Now I got to stab you. When Mark, Russ, and Jamie were driving through Hollywood, a theater marquee can be seen showing Fright Night, another vampire movie released in August of 1985, about 3 months before this film's release in November 1985. So that's crazy. Fright Night had just came out a couple of months before, and it's in this movie. That's crazy. How did they do that? I don't know. I guess they knew that the movie was coming out, so they wanted to give a shout out to that movie. That's the only way I can see that because they had to have filmed this scene months prior to Fright Night coming out. In a revised 1989 edition of The Celluloid Closet, author Vito Russo lambasted screenwriter David Hines for the inclusion of a stereotypical gay butler and a homophobic school shower scene. Ironically, the shower scene was based on a personal experience of co-writer Jeffrey Howes, and the gay butler was conceived by Jonathan Roberts, who was hired by the director to rewrite Howes' and Hines' script. I guess I should have looked up Jonathan Roberts, because are they making this point because Jonathan Roberts himself was homosexual? I don't know if that was why this is significant. You know what? Hold on. I'm going to find out.
A few minutes later.
So no, I don't. I did a little bit of research, and I haven't been able to find anything on the life of Jonathan Roberts. So I don't even know. And Jeffrey Howes, he wrote the shower scene from personal experience, and at least that's what he claimed. Like I said, I said earlier that I am not familiar with the gay butler being a stereotype. There were a lot of butler shows on TV when I was growing up. So there was I forgot what the show was called, but the show Bitten was a spinoff of it. So in the previous show that it was spun off from, it was Robert Guillaume played a butler, and he was a heterosexual butler. And then although I remember I think there was a comedian there that played a gay character, but I don't think he was a butler. I can't remember his name. He's a famous comedian. Everybody knows what he is, but it's his lips. His name is right on the tips of my tongue, but I can't think of it right now. And then there was Mr. Belvedere. Mr. Belvedere was a butler, but he wasn't gay. There was the butler on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. That was a famous role. I don't think it was, like, I didn't see every single episode of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I'm pretty sure that I seen most of them, but I didn't see all of them. Maybe I didn't even look at the last season, but I don't think the butler on that show, even though he was not necessarily the most masculine of characters, but I don't think that they ever identified him as being actually gay. So I don't know. I'm not familiar with the gay butler stereotype. So that's it for the trivia. That's actually 10 pieces of trivia instead of there's actually 11 pieces of trivia instead of 10. I miscounted. Sorry about that. Anyway, let's go on to see what the critics thought. Yeesh, the critics gave it an 11% on Rotten Tomatoes, and the audience score is 39%. Now, IMDb reviews has it at 5.6%. So not a beloved property, not a cult classic, I guess, at least not among the critics. But I, as I said, I absolutely love this film. Felix Vasquez Jr. from Cinema Craze wrote, "The 80s guilty pleasure I go back to again and again for a good chuckle." See, that's me. That not only do I chuckle, but I laugh out loud. However, Marianne Johnson from Flick Philosopher wrote, "Equally wrong and disturbing." And I can see people feeling that way, but I'm not one of those people. Finally, Once Bitten is, as of this recording, available on Netflix and TNT. I want to keep the momentum going in the horror comedy theme, so let's take a look back at everyone's favorite one, Beetlejuice. Try not to say his name 3 times. You can follow us on Blue Sky, Threads, TikTok, Instagram, and sometimes Twitter. Please contact us with any questions, comments, or suggestions at family@backlookcinema.com. Please rate and review on your favorite podcast app. And if you're listening on YouTube, please like or subscribe or leave a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. One last time, if you like this show, then please help us grow by spreading the word about Backlook Cinema, the podcast. Believe me, it matters. I've been Zoe Richardson. Be safe, share a movie from yesteryear with your family, hug your loved ones, and if you're going to be anything, be outstanding.